Good morning. So this morning we're continuing to work through Paul's letter to the church in Ephesus. We've been doing this for the last few weeks. And if you were here last week for our All Together service, we had a little drama up the front here of Jews and Gentiles. Gentiles are those who aren't Jews, so Jews and everyone else. And we had a drama kind of seeing about how these two groups, because of Jesus, are reconciled together, that they both become God's people. So historically, God's people was Israel. The people and the land were special to God. We read through the Old Testament, that's Israel's story with God. And then this radical thing happens that the Gentiles, those who aren't Jews, those who aren't part of Israel, are now included. And so here, it's a bit of a recap. So if you weren't here last week or you missed some of what happened last week, we're going to kind of recap it a bit and unpack it a bit more. First, I wanted to ask if anyone here struggles or has encountered any of these three problems before. Okay, first one. Picture this. You're going about your day, you might be at home, you might be at work, you're doing something, and then suddenly a thought pops into your head and you think, oh yeah, I keep forgetting to do that, I must go and do that quickly. Or I need to run downstairs and get the stuff out of the wash, or whatever it is, or I need to run upstairs and get that book or my phone or whatever. And so you set off, you run downstairs or you run upstairs, you get into the room that you're meant to do whatever you'd planned to do, and you completely forget why you're there. Is that just me? And you take a moment and think, what did I come up for? Or what did I go down for? And you can't remember. So that's the first one. Okay, here's the second problem that you may also encounter. You're in a conversation with someone, there's a bit of back and forth, it's going well, you're having a good chat. Then you suddenly remember something that you wanted to explain, and so there's a quick tangent. So you think, okay, well, I'm going to talk about this quickly, and then I'm going to go back to the conversation we had. So you explain all this, and you talk about this person said this, and then I did this, and blah, blah, blah. And then you get to the end of it, and you think, I'm not quite sure why I told you that. What were we talking about? And the third one, more generally, is just that maybe you get really excited by something. Something happens, maybe you see a dog across the road, and you get excited by it, and then you completely forget what you were doing or what was happening in your life. And here, I think, Paul, in writing this letter, gets distracted, okay? Maybe he gets excited. I don't know if he suddenly remembers something that he wanted to say, that he had planned what he was going to say, and he suddenly thought, oh, I need to include this. Or if he just gets excited and goes off on a little bit of a ramble. You might have noticed, if you've got a keen eye, that at the beginning of our reading, it began with Paul saying, for this reason. For this reason. And so he's going to go and explain something that follows that. And then 13 verses later, at the beginning of verse 14, which we didn't have read to us, he says, for this reason. And so this portion, these verses that we had read to us this morning, are just one big distraction. They're one big kind of digression in what Paul is saying. In fact, verses 2 to 13 is one entire sentence of 189 words. So if you know anyone in your family or any friends who you can't get a word in because they'll just talk and talk and talk and talk without breathing, I think that's what's happening here. When we read it in our English versions, it helps us, it puts some full stops in, it breaks up the sentence, try and help us make sense of what's going on here. But this is 189 words in one sentence. So Paul too gets distracted, it helps me anyway. So what is Paul's distraction? What is it that he's getting distracted by? Give me a wave if you love a good detective program on TV. Few people. Poirot, Miss Marple, Midsummer Murders. What have I missed? Murder She Wrote? I've not seen that. Huh? Columbo. Okay, before my time, I think, Tim. I love watching a detective program. I love trying to work out, you assess every character. Who is it that stole the money? Who killed the person? Where is there like a secret affair going on? And you try and work out what you can. Who's betraying who? And of course, they design it so that you're not really able to guess. So I find the best way to guess whoever did the killing is to guess who's the most unlikely person, that they only show for like a couple of clips, and then it turns out to be them. But I think that there's something even more exciting than this kind of detective program, this trying to kind of work out and guess who is the culprit. And that, I think, is being let into a secret. So a few weeks ago, Leah and I went down to Bristol because I had my kind of final PhD exam to find out whether I'd passed or not. And it all went well, and so we talked before about what we might want to do to celebrate, and we decided to book a table at this restaurant that is our favorite burger place. You've never had burgers like it. It's so good. So we decided we'd book that. And Leah's brother and his family also live in Bristol. And so Leah's parents were visiting for the weekend. So we said, okay, well, let's book this table, and then Leah's parents can come because they're there, and Leah's brother and his family. So had the exam, all went well, so we set out for this burger place called Asado's, if you're interested, if you're ever going to Bristol. Other burger places are available. And what I didn't know is that since March, so 5 months before, Leah had been organising for a load of family and friends to also come and join us for this celebratory meal. And I really threw a spanner in the works because about a week before, I suddenly started thinking of nearby friends who might be up for joining us. And so I started texting them and inviting them. And so Leah had to be saying, okay, Ben's going to message you, just say you're busy, just ignore him, kind of thing. And so we went into this restaurant, and I had absolutely no idea until we walked through, and I saw this long table of all of my kind of family and friends there to celebrate. And I don't know if you've ever been let in on a secret like that. It might have been a surprise party. Maybe it's someone that you know was about to propose to someone, to be engaged, and they told you before. And there's that feeling, isn't there, of kind of feeling really honored to be let in on that secret. But also that hard work of trying to fake it and pretend you don't know something for the months that unfold, and watching everything that you say. And so I think here, in this passage that we've had read, Paul is distracted. But I think more than that, he's probably really excited. And the reason he's excited is because God has let him in to a secret. God's plan is now, because of Jesus, beginning to unfold. This ultimate plan of what it means for God's people, the Jews, and what it means for the Gentiles is becoming a reality. And Paul has been let in on the secret. So if you saw in our reading, there's all this talk of mystery, of revelation, that Jesus encountered Paul, and Paul now knows of this plan that is unfolding for God's people. And so, like us, when we suddenly have a thought and we want to tell someone about it, and then we forget why we said what we said, or what we were talking about before, Paul wants to tell the church about this. But I think even more than that,
he's aware, if you imagine that you are a Jew, okay, and you have been God's people for millennia, and suddenly all of these people who were excluded from God, all of these people that were kind of seen as like the enemy, or like the example of what it looks like not to be a follower of God. The idea that those people are now also included seems a bit unfair. It seems like there's a bit of a lack of justice in that. And so I think Paul also wants to deal with that. And so I wonder, just take a second and think about how you react when something unfair happens. Think about how you react when something unfair happens to someone else. If you see someone being taken advantage of, if there's a kind of, maybe you're not quite sure what to do, or maybe there's a kind of righteous anger that kind of comes up and you just get annoyed about it. But how do you feel when something unfair happens to you? Maybe when someone else is preferred, or someone else gets an opportunity that you didn't get. Well, I'm usually a pretty relaxed person. Sometimes I have those moments of, I like to think of it as righteous anger when I get annoyed about something or on someone's behalf. But every now and again, there's something that happens that really annoys me. And to give you an example, there's a picture that's going to come up on the screen now. Now, I don't know if you can work out what's going on here, but one of the things that really annoys me is when you're in a queue in your car, right, and there's a long queue, and then these cars start whizzing past you. And sometimes it's because they're using a different lane. But sometimes, just sometimes, they know that if they skip the queue, they can pull in later, save a bit of time, and get to the front of the queue. Now, I'm going to leave that between you and God if that's something that you do. But that enrages me. And there's this game that goes on, isn't there? When a car comes past and it tries to get in, suddenly everyone closes the gaps and doesn't look out the window. You just look straight forward and ignore what's going on. And I don't know if it's like worse for like British people, maybe because there's like, we love queuing so much. And there's like the love for queuing and the justice of queues, like plus road rage, I don't know, but that's something that really frustrates me. And Jesus tells a parable that addresses this sense of justice. So we've got a video that's, rather than me explaining the parable, you can listen to the video and then we'll kind of pick back up on that.
For the kingdom of heaven is like a master of a house who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard. And going out about the third hour, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And to them he said, "You go into the vineyard too, and whatever is right I will give you." So they went. Going out again about the 6th hour and the 9th hour, he did the same. And about the 11th hour he went out and found others standing. And he said to them, "Why do you stand here idle all day?" They said to him, "Because no one has hired us." He said to them, "You go into the vineyard too." And when evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the laborers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last up to the first." And when those hired about the 11th hour came, Each of them received a denarius. Now when those hired first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received a denarius. And on receiving it, they grumbled at the master of the house, saying, "These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat." But he replied to one of them, "Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last worker as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or do you begrudge my generosity?" So the last will be first, and the first last.
Okay. So here, Jesus is describing what the kingdom of God is like. And that's a really broad thing. But when I've heard this passage before, I've often had that feeling of like, why are these people complaining? They knew what they signed up for. But if we see ourselves as those people who were working all day and received exactly the same as those who worked a little bit, it really seems kind of unfair. And a few years ago, I was doing a placement in Jerusalem, and we had a Bible study, and we were reading this passage and talking about it. And I was told that for a lot of people, they understand this as speaking to the experience of Jews and Gentiles. Jews as those that have been working all day, and Gentiles as those that have come in at the last minute and receive exactly the same thing. But that is God's grace, and that is good news. Particularly those of us, I imagine most of us who are Gentiles, who don't have Jewish heritage, this is good news. And the mystery that's unfolding here that Paul wants to share with the church is his plan of cosmic restoration, that all things being renewed, that all occurs and is found in the person of Jesus. That because of Jesus, these Gentiles are now co-heirs. They inherit everything from God. They are co-body members. They are part of the body of Christ. And they are co-sharers of the promise. Everything that has been promised to God's people, the people of Israel, is now shared with the Gentiles. And so for us, that means that we get to share in the fullness of God's promises, that we are his people. And Paul prays that this multifaceted wisdom, this diverse wisdom, this broad wisdom is shared with us that we might know it. But it goes further than that. Paul says that this wisdom, this revelation of Jesus, isn't just for people, but it's for the rulers and the authorities in the heavens. What Paul is saying is that there is no power, that there is no authority in heaven or on earth that is unaware of who Jesus is, of what Jesus has done, and the authority that he has been given by God the Father. And so this digression, this distraction, this excited moment of Paul's, why is he so excited? Because he understands how profound this is, that we can all share in God. And Paul is a Jew himself, so for him, he was sharing in that anyway. but he's come to understand the reality of Jesus, of who Jesus is. He's gone from someone who persecuted Christians, who killed them, to now sharing this gospel of Jesus with others. So that's great. That's great for Paul, and I'm great that he's excited. And obviously that has an impact on us and means a lot. But what does it really mean in the day-to-day things? Well, it defines our identity. It tells us who we are. If we ever feel like we're not good enough, or we don't measure up, or God doesn't love us as much as other people, we need to remember that it's got nothing to do with who we are or what we do. That comes afterwards. But God's grace flows to every single one of us, and we share in the promises of God. It doesn't mean that life's going to be easy and that there's no suffering and everything will be great all the time. But we're in a spiritual battle. And we know that all of those spiritual powers know who Jesus is and know what our identity is. And finally, we're going to have a bit of time to pray in a moment. But I wonder, if we're real with ourselves, how do you feel about that secret, that mystery that's been revealed to us that we know? Because like Paul, there's a lot of people in this world who don't know it. There's a lot of people who have never heard it, who don't know God's plan for them, don't know what their identity is in God. And we're called as God's people to share that with others. So should we stand? Maybe the worship team can come back.